All jokes aside, this made me think on this following verse from Genesis. By a happy coincidence, we find paired a woman's labour pains with Boromir, who, in my humble opinion, embodies the old man, the natural man at his best, the man of labour and toil for but thorns and thistles. Boromir is the seed of Denethor, and in many very real respects the image of his father. They are not evil men, in fact far from it. As I said, they are the best of men, the best of the old man. They are both loyal to Gondor and her people. They live for them, but it is all they live for. The old heathen values of glory, honour, loyalty, the echo of their name throughout the ages. There is nothing inherently wrong in these values, but when there is no transcendent centre to them, they become as the very earthly things they are centred in. They perish. The fleeting and temporal nature of these earthly things is something both Denethor and Boromir become lucidly aware of as the darkness of Sauron spreads across Middle-earth. They both despair and cling to the temporal, at first. Denethor remains entrenched in the ways of the old man unto his demise, even unto the peculiar words, in a story with no overt Christian references, and set before any such equivalent incarnation, that we, Faramir, will burn like heathen kings before ever a ship sailed hither from the west, or like the heathen kings of old in the movies. Denethor cannot see beyond the temporal glories of this world, and, fittingly perhaps, chooses a death of despair in the hellish flames of a funeral pyre. Previously Denethor had rejected the true king, and his life ended in the torment of flame. Boromir steps into the same pattern. In Tolkien's epic, Boromir does not reject Aragorn's kingship so vehemently as with the movies. It is more a disinterested doubt born out of his sense of a tangible duty to his people that he feels, it seems, the matters of the restoration of the kingly line to be small potatoes.
So be it, he said. Then in Gondor we must trust to such weapons as we have. And at least while the wise ones guard this ring, we will fight on. Mayhap the sword that was broken may still stem the tide, but the hand that wields it has inherited not an heirloom only, but the sinews of the kings of men.
Yet this is often how we reject the true king. I have important things to do. I'll pray if I have time left over. I'm faithful to Christ, but when serious trouble arises, the priority is on doing things that actually work. Men do this especially. We labour and toil by the sweat of our brow to fix problems. Our very identity is often found in such a life. There is a Faustian restlessness that Tolkien captures perfectly in his race of men. This restlessness that defines the fallen man even at his most noble is beautifully and heart-wrenchingly portrayed in the movies, with a scene in Lothlorien where Boromir tells Aragorn of his despair. Encouraging him to take some rest, Aragorn receives the reply that Boromir will not find rest there, in Lothlorien. Lothlorien, that place that is seemingly in a state of perpetual rest, an Edenic paradise frozen in time as if one had wandered into the memory of the world before the fall.
I will find no rest here. I heard her voice inside my head. She spoke of my father and the fall of Gondor. And she said to me, even now there is hope left. But I cannot see it. It is long since we had any hope.
Yet it is not really Lothlorien that is the catalyst for Boromir's restlessness, but the place or state of his heart that he all too readily admits to. Boromir's identity lies in his being a son of Gondor and the son of the steward of Gondor. That is what fills his heart. The Lady Galadriel speaks of his father and the fall of Gondor, and so his very existence, everything he thinks he is, becomes as so much dust, just as the crumbling walls of the great city should it fall. Boromir goes on to share with Aragorn his memories of the White City, a description that glimmers with a transcendent light that would seem to suggest, at least in this moment, amidst his despair, that Boromir intuits something of the heavenly, of that which is reflected in Minas Tirith's glorious image yet lies beyond, a heavenly city such as the heavenly Jerusalem we are all familiar with from the Christian tradition. He talks of this city in an almost apocalyptic manner, of being called home by the clear ringing of silver trumpets, and the tower guards as if mighty cherubim announcing the return of the lords of Gondor. He says he cannot see hope, yet hope stirs within him as a seed. That seed must be cultivated, though, and Boromir almost gives in to despair, seeking the ring as a means to cling to who he thinks he is, not realizing that in doing so he shall lose who he really is. In the movie, Frodo resists him. You are not yourself. Boromir almost falls into the same madness that would eventually take his father, almost burning in the funeral pyre of temporal temptation. Instead he stumbles and falls in his attempt to chase after Frodo. This seemingly knocks sense into him, as so often we must hit rock bottom to realize our weakness and need. The fall of man, that is, the consequences for man's disobedience and pride, was a blessing in disguise. We are allowed to fall so that we might realize our need. Lest we become crystallized in our sin, we are granted death, so that, recognizing our mortality, we might call on the author of life. Boromir arises, and though tormented by the shame of his actions, is redeemed through the perfect act of charity. He dies in defense of two hobbits, these two small, simple little people who seem the most insignificant fellows in the Fellowship, from a people who seem as the most insignificant peoples of Middle-earth. Boromir's body is riddled with arrows like so many thorns reaching up from a cursed earth. He prepares to taste the bitter fruits of that cursed earth, death. Yet in his offering up of earthly sufferings to that which is beyond the earthly, he is redeemed and gains the rest he has desired. Confessing his weakness to his brother Aragorn, and confessing his brother as king, explicitly so in the movies, declaring his faithfulness to the rightful heir to the throne, but also implicitly in the books. He dies to all those things he thought he was.
Farewell, Aragorn. Go to Minas Tirith and save my people. I have failed. No, said Aragorn, taking his hand and kissing his brow. You have conquered. Few have gained such a victory. Be at peace. Minas Tirith shall not fall.
Boromir admits he cannot do what only the true king can do. In urging him to go to Minas Tirith and save his people, he knows exactly what that will mean, the coronation of the king. Aragorn's words to Boromir in the book are most fitting. He declares he has conquered and gained a victory that few do. Of course, Aragorn is speaking of a victory of the soul. Boromir has not fallen into despair. He has allowed hope to enter in. He has repented of his wrongdoing, recognized his weakness and need, and loved that perfect, transcendent love. He dies no longer entrenched in temporal things, but with faithfulness, hope, and charity overflowing, and his eyes transfixed on his king. And his king grants him that peace he could not find in his time in Lothlorien, and affirms that the White City shall not fall, as if to reassure him of that heavenly city that he had intuited in that moment, of the Golden Wood.